Welcome back to Black Tapes. Before we begin today's story, I want to thank you all for your patience and support. It has been a little while since the last upload, and I truly appreciate everyone who has stayed with the channel during the break. Today, we return with a case that shocked both Japan and the United Kingdom, and remains one of the most infamous stories in modern true crime. It begins in the summer of 2000, when a young British woman disappeared in the bustling nightlife district of Roppongi, Tokyo. What followed was an investigation that uncovered the dark secrets of a wealthy but reclusive man, Joji Obara. This is the story of the Roppongi rapist and the disappearance of Lucie Blackman. On July 1st, 2000, Tokyo's vibrant nightlife district of Roppongi was alive with its usual mix of neon lights, bustling bars, and crowds of people from around the world. But for one young woman, that evening marked the beginning of a tragedy that would capture international headlines. Her name was Lucie Blackman, a 21-year-old from the United Kingdom who had come to Japan in search of new experiences and opportunities. Lucie had previously worked as a flight attendant for British Airways, but she left the job in hopes of finding something different. Along with her friend Louise Phillips, she traveled to Japan, where she found work as a hostess in Roppongi. Hostess clubs, popular in Tokyo, catered to wealthy men who paid for conversation, drinks, and company. For many young foreigners, this type of work was a way to earn money quickly, though it was often misunderstood outside Japan. Lucie was described by friends and family as adventurous, outgoing, and full of life. She stood tall at nearly 6 feet, with blonde hair and a warm smile that made her popular among club patrons. But her job, while lucrative, also carried risks. Hostesses were often pressured to spend time outside the clubs with clients, and Lucie herself confided to friends that she sometimes felt uncomfortable about certain encounters. On the afternoon of July 1st, Lucie told Louise that she had plans to meet a wealthy businessman. She promised she would be back later that evening. At 6 p.m., she called her friend from her cell phone, saying that she was going for a drive along the coast and would return soon. That call was the last time anyone close to her ever heard her voice. When Lucie failed to return home that night, Louise grew worried. Hours stretched into the next day, and still there was no word from her friend. At first, some thought she might have simply decided to stay out longer than expected, but for those who knew her well, this was out of character. By July 2nd, it was clear that something was wrong. Louise contacted Lucie's family in the UK, and within days, her father, Tim Blackman, flew to Japan to join the search. The disappearance of a young British woman in Tokyo immediately drew international attention. The British press began covering the story extensively, and Japanese media outlets soon followed. What began as a missing person case was quickly becoming a high-profile international mystery. As police began their investigation, the scope of the case widened. They interviewed friends, co-workers, and club patrons, trying to trace Lucie's last movements. It was soon established that she had last been seen leaving with a man. This man would later be identified as Joji Obara, a wealthy but reclusive figure with a hidden past. At the time, however, he was just a name in a growing investigation. The disappearance of Lucie Blackman had set into motion a chain of events that would uncover one of the most notorious cases in Japanese true crime history. To understand the disappearance of Lucie Blackman, it is necessary to look at the man who would later stand accused, Joji Obara. Born in 1952, Obara came from a wealthy Korean family living in Japan. Though his family had resources and influence, he grew up feeling like an outsider. In post-war Japan, Korean heritage often carried stigma, and despite his privileged background, Obara was marked by a sense of isolation that would follow him throughout his life. As a student, Obara showed signs of intelligence, but also of arrogance. Those who knew him described him as calculating and self-centered. He studied law at Chuo University, one of Tokyo's respected private universities, but failed to graduate. After dropping out, he began to drift, relying on inherited wealth and shady business dealings rather than building a traditional career. Over time, he accumulated considerable assets through real estate investments, giving him the appearance of a successful, wealthy entrepreneur. Despite his outward success, Obara led a double life. He was reclusive and eccentric, living alone in luxury apartments. He often presented himself as an international entrepreneur, speaking multiple languages and projecting an air of sophistication. But behind closed doors, his behavior was deeply troubling. Neighbors later recalled that he kept to himself, rarely socializing, and was often seen driving expensive cars late at night. Obara's relationship with women was also unusual. While he frequented hostess clubs and presented himself as a generous client, his interactions were marked by control and manipulation. Over time, he developed patterns of behavior that would later become central to the criminal investigations against him. Authorities eventually uncovered that he kept meticulous records, including video footage, documenting his encounters in disturbing detail. This obsessive documentation revealed not only a compulsion, but also a dangerous disregard for others. In public, Obara remained a shadowy figure, wealthy, mysterious, and seemingly untouchable. For years, his behavior went unnoticed by authorities, shielded by his wealth and his careful secrecy. But when Lucie Blackman disappeared in July 2000, investigators began to pull back the layers of his life. What they uncovered shocked not only Japan, but also the world. The story of Joji Obara was no longer about a wealthy recluse. It was about a man whose hidden obsessions had crossed into criminal reality, and whose life of secrecy would eventually unravel under the weight of an international investigation. The summer of 2000 saw Tokyo filled with visitors, business travelers, and the constant rhythm of city life. Amidst this backdrop, the sudden disappearance of Lucie Blackman became one of the most high-profile missing person cases Japan had ever seen. What began as a personal worry among friends quickly turned into an international story that captured headlines in both Japan and the United Kingdom. After Lucie failed to return on the night of July 1st, her friend, Louise Phillips, reported her absence to the police. At first, authorities treated the case with caution. In a city as large and fast-paced as Tokyo, young foreigners sometimes disappeared temporarily, only to reappear later. But as the hours passed without contact, concern grew. By July 2nd, Lucie's father, Tim Blackman, had already flown from London to Tokyo, determined to search for his daughter himself. Tim Blackman's presence in Japan gave the case immediate visibility. He spoke directly to the press, pleading for information, and appealed to both Japanese and British authorities to intensify the search. The image of a grieving father in a foreign land resonated deeply, and soon the story was on the front pages of newspapers across the globe. British Prime Minister Tony Blair, who was visiting Japan at the time, even raised the case directly with Japanese officials, underscoring the diplomatic weight it is. Police began piecing together Lucie's final hours. Witnesses confirmed that she had left her hostess club in Roppongi with a man who introduced himself as a wealthy businessman. That man was later identified as Joji Obara. Investigators soon learned that Obara had a reputation in certain circles, a man who moved in luxury, but with an air of secrecy. His name began to appear repeatedly in accounts from people connected to hostess clubs and nightlife in Tokyo. The investigation was complex. Japanese police had to balance cultural sensitivity, public pressure, and the need for solid evidence. The involvement of a foreign victim added a layer of urgency. Detectives traced phone calls, interviewed dozens of hostesses, and searched areas near the coast, where Lucie had mentioned going in her last phone call to Louise. Volunteers also joined the search, distributing flyers with Lucie's photograph across Tokyo. As weeks passed, frustration mounted. Despite international attention and constant media coverage, no breakthrough came immediately. Rumors circulated, theories spread, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on Lucie's family. For Tim Blackman and the growing community of supporters, the weight was agonizing. But beneath the surface, the investigation was slowly tightening around Obara. His past behavior, his hidden lifestyle, and the growing stack of circumstantial evidence pointed in one direction. The search for Lucie Blackman was no longer just a missing person case. It had become a test of Japanese justice, an international diplomatic issue, and the key to exposing the secret life of Joji Obara. The world was watching, and the outcome would have lasting consequences for how Japan handled crimes involving foreigners and its own hidden figures of wealth and influence. As weeks turned into months after Lucie Blackman's disappearance, investigators intensified their efforts to uncover the truth. The Japanese police, under pressure from both the public and the British government, pursued every lead with determination. What began as a missing person search was now widely believed to be a criminal case, and the focus increasingly pointed toward one man, Joji Obara. Detectives traced Lucie's last known movements and confirmed that she had been seen leaving Roppongi with Obara, who introduced himself as a wealthy businessman. As they looked deeper into his background, they discovered inconsistencies in his story and a pattern of troubling behavior that raised serious suspicions. In September 2000, investigators obtained warrants to search Obara's luxury apartment and storage facilities. What they found shocked even seasoned officers. Inside, they uncovered a massive collection of videotapes, hundreds of recordings meticulously cataloged. Many depicted encounters that revealed predatory behavior stretching back over years. The sheer scale of the evidence suggested that Lucie's case was not an isolated incident, but part of a much larger pattern. Alongside the tapes, police found personal notes, photographs, and records of women he had met in hostess clubs. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of a man living a double life, polished and wealthy in public, but secretive and disturbing in private. The discovery fueled media coverage, and Joji Obara's name began appearing in newspapers almost daily. Public outrage grew, especially as details emerged about how long his behavior had gone unnoticed. The British press amplified the story further, and the case became an international scandal. Then, in October 2000, investigators made the discovery that confirmed the darkest fears. Lucie Blackman's remains were found near a seaside cave in Miura, south of Tokyo. The location was remote and hidden, consistent with efforts to conceal the crime. The finding devastated her family and supporters, and it transformed the case into a full homicide investigation. With the evidence mounting, the tapes, the records, and now the discovery of Lucie's body, the investigation firmly centered on Joji Obara. While the legal process was still to come, the police had now revealed the secret life of a man whose outward success masked years of predatory behavior. The trial of Joji Obara began in 2001, nearly a year after the discovery of Lucie Blackman's body. From the outset, it was clear this would not be a straightforward case. Prosecutors faced the difficult task of proving Obara's responsibility not only for Lucie's death, but also for a long history of predatory behavior. The videotapes seized from his apartment became central to the prosecution's case, providing chilling documentation of his actions over many years. The defense, however, argued that while Obara's behavior was disturbing, there was insufficient direct evidence linking him to Lucie's death. Without clear forensic proof, they claimed, a conviction for murder could not be justified. This argument highlighted one of the challenges of the Japanese legal system: the high burden of proof required in cases of homicide, especially when the evidence was circumstantial. Over the next several years, the trial moved slowly. Dozens of women came forward to testify, describing encounters that revealed Obara's pattern of manipulation and abuse. For Lucie's family, the process was agonizing, a prolonged and public examination of their daughter's final days. Tim Blackman remained a vocal presence, demanding justice for Lucie and criticizing the pace of the proceedings. In 2007, the Tokyo District Court delivered its verdict. Obara was convicted on multiple counts of sexual assault and sentenced to life imprisonment. But in a controversial decision, the court acquitted him of charges directly related to Lucie Blackman's death. The ruling shocked many, particularly in the United Kingdom, where the case had become a matter of national concern. Lucie's family expressed outrage, arguing that justice had not been done. The prosecution appealed, and in 2008, the High Court of Tokyo partially overturned the earlier ruling. Obara was found guilty of dismembering and disposing of Lucie's body, and his life sentence was upheld. While the verdict brought some measure of closure, it also underscored the frustrations of a complex legal battle. For many, the outcome remained unsatisfactory, leaving questions about accountability and justice.
Beyond the courtroom, the legacy of the case was profound. In Japan, it sparked debates about the treatment of foreign women working in hostess clubs and the vulnerabilities they faced. It also cast a long shadow over the otaku and nightlife subcultures, with media narratives often exaggerating the connection between Obara's crimes and broader cultural trends. Internationally, the case highlighted the challenges of cross-border justice. The involvement of British authorities and the personal appeals of Tony Blair underscored the diplomatic dimensions of the investigation. Lucie's death became not only a criminal matter, but also a symbol of the need for stronger protections for young women abroad. For the Blackman family, the loss was immeasurable. Yet out of their grief came a lasting effort to honor Lucie's memory. They established the Lucie Blackman Trust, a foundation dedicated to helping families of missing persons overseas. Through this work, Lucie's name continues to stand for support and solidarity, ensuring that her story contributes to the protection of others. Today, Joji Obara remains one of Japan's most notorious criminals, and the case of Lucie Blackman endures as one of the most infamous crimes in modern Japanese history. It is remembered not only for the tragedy it represents, but also for the lessons it carries about justice, vulnerability, and the need to confront the hidden dangers that can lie behind wealth and respectability. The case of Joji Obara and the disappearance of Lucie Blackman is one of the darkest and most complex in modern Japanese crime history. It reminds us not only of the dangers hidden behind wealth and respectability, but also of the strength of families who demand justice in the face of unimaginable loss. If you found this documentary meaningful, please consider subscribing to Black Tapes and leaving a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you prefer this longer single case format or the multi-case iceberg style we've done before? Your feedback helps shape the future of the channel, and every like, comment, and subscription truly makes a difference. Thank you for watching and for keeping these stories alive.